Welcome to our Mind Power Mentor channel. I started this channel to help people to understand the power of our mind, so that we can use it to improve our lives.
I'd like to start with a story. And the story is about Team Sky, which is Great Britain's professional cycling team. Sometime in the mid-2000s, around 2010, they hired a man named Dave Brailsford. And at the time, Team Sky had a very middle-of-the-road record when it came to performance on the world stage. They had won about one gold medal in the last 100 years, from 1908 to 2008. They had never won a Tour de France, the premier event in cycling. And when they hired Dave Brailsford, they said, we would like to change this. We'd like to improve our performance. We'd like to reach a higher level of performance. What's your plan to help us do that? And when they hired Brailsford, he said, I have this strategy called the aggregation of marginal gains. And the way that he described it was the 1% improvement in nearly everything that you do. And so they started by looking at a lot of things you would expect a cycling team to look at. They improved their bike tires, made them slightly lighter. They put a more ergonomic seat on the bike. They had their riders wear biofeedback sensors so they could see how each person responded to the training and practice that they did each day. They had their outdoor riders wear indoor racing suits because they were lighter and more aerodynamic. But then they did a variety of things that you wouldn't expect a cycling team to do. They split tested different types of massage gels to see which one led to the best form of recovery. They taught their riders how to wash their hands to reduce the risk of infection and keep them healthy. They even figured out what kind of pillow led to the best night's sleep for each rider, and then brought that on the road with them to hotels. So Brailsford said, if we can actually execute on this strategy, if we can aggregate all these small changes, these little 1% improvements, then I think we can win the Tour de France in about 5 years. He ended up being wrong. They won the Tour de France in 3 years, and then they repeated again the 4th year with a different rider. And then just last year, they won for the 3rd time in 4 years. And Brailsford's strategy really came to fruition at the Olympics in London in 2012, when they won 70% of the gold medals available. And so what I'd like to start us off with is the idea that small improvements actually can add up to a very significant change in a relatively short period of time. And this is just basic math, all right? If you get 1% better each day over 365 days, you end up 37 times better at the end of the year. If you get 1% worse, you take yourself almost all the way down to zero. And this idea that 1% improvements are not just nice to have or not just a nice little bonus, but actually something significant that adds up to a very substantial increase in the long run is the place that I'd like to start us at today. Now, you might say, okay, well, 1% improvements are nice, but clearly no one is going to get 1% better every single day. So is that ever enough to accumulate to anything, considering that we're not going to be perfect all the time? And I would argue, yes. In fact, you can get 10 times better if you get 1% better 5 days a week, 46 weeks a year, so that's about 230 days in total. That gives you 6 weeks off for holidays, illness, laziness, and just generally not getting things done. But you're still 10 times better at the end of the year. And what I would like to propose is that the way to do this is not by setting better goals for ourselves or at our organizations, but by building better systems and obtaining better habits. In fact, you could say that the system had always been there for Brailsford and Team Sky. The goal had always been there. The goal had never changed. They wanted to win a Tour de France each year. They wanted to win Olympic gold medals. It wasn't the goal that made the difference. Instead, it was their system, the way that they applied those improvements in a 1% basis day after day. So, the remainder of this talk is about how to do that. How to do that for ourselves, how to do that in our organizations, how do we make those 1% changes tangible, possible, and real in the environments that we're in each day. The key idea here is that the biggest surprise about these small systemic changes, about these tiny habits, is that they add up to something very significant and meaningful. In order to do this, to talk about how to build these better habits, how to build these better systems, I'm going to take what I'm going to call an inside-out approach. We'll start by focusing on the psychology of the individual, the psychology of you, and we'll gradually work out from our mindset and the things that we believe and the way that our mind works to the environment that we surround ourselves with each day and the team members that we're surrounded by at work and in organizations. I want to thank a few people who've influenced my work in a substantial way. BJ Fogg, Leo Babauta, Nira Yal, Kelly McGonigal, Dan Party, and Scott Adams. Their work has influenced everything that I'll share in this presentation. I think it's important to cite them. And I also have a long list of other people who've influenced my work at jamesclear.com/thanks. So, part one, mindset. There was a study done at Yale University on the psychology of aging, and it was a 23-year study. They talked to people, and they basically went into one of two cohorts. The first cohort had positive views of aging. So when they asked them how they felt about aging or what their expectations were for old age, they had relatively good things to say. I would be moving into the prime of my life, or I'll be smarter than I've ever been before. They were very positive about it. The second group was very negative about it. My body's going to wear down. I don't have much to look forward to. Everybody gets sick. We'll all die at some point, that type of thing. What they found was that of the 660 adults in the study, the ones with positive views of aging lived, on average, 7.6 years longer. And that actually is a very significant number. Things like exercise and diet don't account for 7.6 years in life expectancy. So why, if your view is positive? The reason is because you'll take healthy actions as a result, and if your view is negative, you'll assume that deterioration of your health is inevitable. If you have a positive view of aging, you'll say something like, well, I should continue to eat healthy and work out because I feel good about moving into old age. I still have a lot to live for. Whereas if you have a negative view of aging, you'll say something like, what's the point in me exercising? I'm going to get sick anyway. I'm expecting to get old, and so on. The point here is that there's a deeper level of behavior change and habit formation than what we often discuss. And the way that I would describe it is this. The outer layer of behavior change are the results that we get, the outcome, the goal. So that's the outside layer. Often we say we need better goals, we need better outcomes, we need better results, we need to hit new sales numbers. And so to do that, we take one step in on behavior change and we talk about our actions. Now, the actions and the results are usually where we stop when it comes to habits and behavior change. We say, how can we build better habits? How can we take action on this particular goal? How can we take an action to get a result? But I would argue, and that Yale study would prove this, that there's a deeper level of behavior change as well. And that level is identity or belief or mindset. You can take your pick of what you'd like to term it. But the identity that we hold drives the actions that we take and the results that we get. So in the Yale study, the people have a positive identity when it comes to aging. They believe that they should take positive actions, and thus they get better results in the long run. We'll take a common example when it comes to personal habits, weight loss. So losing 20 pounds or 10 kilos over the next 6 months, that'll be the outer layer, okay? That'll be the result that you're going for. In order to lose those 10 kilos, you need to move in to the actions that you take. And so that would be something like working out 3 times a week or eating healthy. But most people stop there and they don't shift the underlying identity that drives the behavior. So for example, in this case, the identity might be, I want to become the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. And my argument is, if we focus just on the identity, if you become the type of person who doesn't miss workouts, if you become the type of person who exercises consistently, and only focus on the core of behavior change, it ripples out to the other layers anyway. So, the key idea here is that a shift in mindset leads to a shift in daily choices, and a shift in daily choices leads to significantly better results in the long run. All right, part 2, priorities. I actually think this is the most text I'll have on any slide, but I think it's a great quote. The word priority came into the English language in the 1400s. It was singular. It meant the first or very prior thing, and it stayed singular for the next 500 years. Only in the 1900s did we pluralize the term and start talking about priorities. Illogically, we reasoned that by changing the word, we could bend reality, and somehow we would now have multiple first things. You hear about this a lot in organizations. They'll talk about priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4. Everything is a priority, everything is an urgency, even though it's not possible for us to focus on more than one thing at a time. So this second section on priorities, you could also call it ruthless elimination. And when it comes to building better habits and changing behavior in organizations and in our personal lives, we have to be ruthless about the things that we focus on. So in order to talk about this some more and talk about the importance of simplifying, why should we only have one priority than 3 or 4 or 5, I'd like to talk about a psychological concept called the Zeigarnik effect. The Zeigarnik effect is best illustrated by a story from Germany in the 1920s. There were a group of men that went into a restaurant, and there were about 4 of them. They sat down to have lunch, and their waiter came up and took their orders and remembered them all without writing any of it down. And it was a relatively complex order, so when he came back and the food was wonderful and it was exactly what they ordered, they were impressed. They were impressed that he could remember everything that they had told them for the order. And so they finished their meal, they got up out of the restaurant, walked down the street, and one of the men realized that he left his wallet at the restaurant. So he turned around, went back in, and flagged down the waiter and said, I'm sorry, I forgot my wallet. Do you know where it is? I leave it at the table. And the waiter looked at him and said, I'm sorry, who are you? And he said, you just waited on us. We were really impressed with your memory. You remembered our entire order. We were just here. And the waiter said, oh, I only remember each order until it's filled. And the lesson here is that the Zeigarnik effect is this tendency that we have to experience intrusive thoughts about something that we're working on, an objective that was once pursued and left incomplete. So if you have projects at your work that are half finished, these things are open loops in your mind, and it's like a nagging brain, right? It creates this curiosity gap, or this gap in your brain for all the things that you have not finished yet. And I would argue that our brains are often like, it's like a computer. There's only a certain amount of memory available, right? And so for each open task that is left unfinished, you drain the percentage of memory that you have available for the other tasks that you're working on. So the more unfinished tasks that you have available, the more priorities that you have at any one time, the more open loops that you have, the less percentage of memory and power and attention and focus that you can deliver to the thing that you're working on at any given time. It's the Zeigarnik effect in action. We actually have some good data on this. There was a study of parole board judges. There were about 1,000 of them, 1,000 cases that they looked at in this particular research study. And the parole board judges would have criminals come out. They would sit before the parole board, and then they would vote on whether or not they would be released from prison or would have to go back in. What you would hope, is that in order for a criminal to get released from prison, it should be based on the time they served, the type of crime that they did, whether or not they had good behavior, all sorts of things built into the criminal justice system. In fact, what they found, the single biggest factor on whether or not someone was released on parole or whether they had to go back into prison was the time of day that they received. So this is a map of the judge's decisions throughout the day. You can see that in the beginning of the day, it starts around 60% likelihood that a criminal would be released on parole. As the morning goes on, the judges get fatigued, their willpower depletes, and the odds of you getting a favorable hearing decreases. That first dotted line is lunch. So they take a break, the judge's decision-making spikes right back up to where it was before, then goes back down, they take another break in the afternoon, and then pretty soon it just falls off the cliff and the day ends. Now, this idea is a psychological concept called decision fatigue, or ego depletion, you'll sometimes hear it called. And the point here is that the more decisions that we make over the course of a day, the more your willpower and focus gets fatigued. It's kind of like a muscle, right? If I were to pick up that weight and do curls for a little while, I can do them for a minute or two, but if you catch me 30 minutes from now, I'm not going to have much left. And that's how our willpower works as well.
I have adapted the material of this video from the oldest books about self-help, Atomic Habits by James Clear. You can find the link of the book in the description below. Would you like to discover the secrets of your brain? Then take quick test in description below to assess your brain if it is programmed to make wealth or not. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe our channel. I upload similar videos every week. Subscribe help us to make continued videos like this, so subscribe. Thank you again.